beings. But hey, Davis never says in Yom Tov Svarim, so Hashgacha Pratis. I heard a story recently from Rabbi Aaron Lezer Zeitlin. He told me that Hashgacha Pratis arranged he should be in Montreal before Rosh Hashanah. He wasn't meant to be there. He was meant to be in Eretz Yisrael. And since he was in Montreal, he went to visit a good friend, Rabbi Moshe Nu, who runs a beautiful Torah center. And being there, so Rabbi Nu said to him, Aaron Lezer, I want you to say something on Shabbos. I want you to speak. He said, I can't speak here. Such a place, you have to be a professional orator. So he didn't take no for an answer. You had to go up, you had to say something. As he was walking up the steps, I've never been there, I imagine it's a grand pulpit with marble steps leading up to a podium. And he's thinking, what should he talk about? Should he talk about tshuva, se'asicha? Or should he tell a story? People like stories. As he got to the top step, he decided he would tell a story. The week before, he happened to be in Belgium. He stayed with a friend who was the son-in-law of Mrs. Esther, of Rabbi Sternberg and Mrs. Sternberg. The Sternbergs, as everybody knows, have always been in charge of the Neshek campaign there at Shabbos Kodesh. Since the campaign began, after the Yom Kippur War, during the summer, Tovshin Lamed Ches, Mrs. Sternberg was not well. She was partially paralyzed and was recovering from her illness. In the middle of the summer, she gets a phone call. Her husband gets a phone call from Rabbi Hadakov. He wants to know what's doing with the second book about Shabbos candles. She had produced a book about girls lighting Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe wanted to know what's going with the second book. אז רבי חודקוב רצה לדעת מה יהיה עם הספר השני של על נשק. Okay. And I'm not going to leave anything out in English, don't worry. Just filling them in. She went into a panic. She didn't know how could she possibly produce a book. She had no material. She hadn't dreamed of writing a book. Lo chamalzen. Lo ela chomer. And she wasn't well. The time was very short. How could she produce a book in 6 weeks? And the Rebbe wanted the book before Rosh Hashanah. But she knew if the Rebbe was asking, it had to be done. She was frantic. When a person is frantic, they come up with an idea. She had a daughter in Camp Emunah. She called her daughter and said, please, get the girls to write compositions, as many as you can, about lighting a Shabbos candle. And her daughter went through the camp and got girls to write a little composition, and they sent it in, and she produced a book, A Candle of My Own. Beautiful book. And she gave it into the Rebbe before Rosh Hashanah. It was a nest. And the Rebbe was very happy. Why did the Rebbe want the book? And why did he want it in such a hurry? She never found out. There was never an explanation. She never knew. After Shleishim Shana, 30 years later, from Tovshin Lamed Ches, Tovshin Samech Ches, she gets a phone call a few years ago. Tovshin Samech Ches. A woman identifies herself as Yana Geyser. She says, Mrs. Sternberg. Says, yes. Are you the person who put together this book about Shabbos candles? She says, yes. She says, I was told to call you by my Chabad rabbi. You see, I live in Philadelphia. I am from Russian background, and I have a very good friend. We've been friends since we were little girls. Recently, both of our families have been coming close to Yiddishkeit. בזמן האחרון שני המשפחות שלנו התקרבו ליהדות. But the other family, my dear friend Laura, she was against the whole thing. Her husband was coming close to Yiddishkeit, the children were coming close. She didn't want. Last Shabbos, we were by our rabbi in his house, and my daughter was looking through his books, and she sees this book about lighting Shabbos candles, and one of the entries there is written in Russian, caught her eye, and she looks at the name. The name there is Laura Ravender. She comes running over to me. She says, Mommy, is this Laura? Is this your friend, Laura Fisher? I read the composition, a very beautiful composition. She says, yes. When she was at camp, she wrote this composition 30 years ago. I must get this book. I want to show it to her. Maybe this will help, that she should get over whatever problem she's having. Because she wrote there about how wonderful it was to light a Shabbos candle. And when the Shabbos candle, when Shabbos comes in, it's like a Yom Tov for herself and for the whole camp. She always wants to keep Shabbos. She always wants to keep Shabbos. And when she goes home, she hopes her family will also want to keep Shabbos. Well, it didn't work. She went home. Her family did not like her newfound religion. They didn't like her davening. They didn't like her saying brachas. And the Baba said, don't worry, she'll grow out of it. And with their discouragement, she did. So Mrs. Sternberg said, I must have this book. Mrs. Sternberg said, they're sold out. She says, can't you find any? She said, I kept 2 or 3. I'll take a look. If I can find one, I'll send it to you. And she did. And again, she heard no reply. Nothing. Several weeks later, she gets another phone call. This time it's from Laura herself. She said, Mrs. Sternberg, I want to thank you. Last week, my friends made for me a surprise birthday party. In the middle of the room, there was an easel. And set up on the easel was a large blow-up of the composition that I wrote for your book 30 years ago. I read it, and I burst into tears. Because it was written at a time when I spoke only the truth. And it was very, very meaningful to me, and I want to thank you. This is the story that Lazer Zeitlin told from the pulpit, and when he finished, he encouraged everybody to do a mitzvah for the new year, because you can see what one little mitzvah can do, that even 30 years later it can come back to help you and to influence others. As he walks down from the podium, a man jumps up from the aisle and grabs him by the sleeve. He says, Rabbi, that story you told us about my wife is Yana. We live in Philadelphia. I just happened to be here for Shabbos. Nobody could believe this. That Shabbos was unbelievable. At the Kiddush after the Shabbos, people that Rabbi knew had been trying to make some progress in Yiddishkeit and refused to budge over years. They took on achlotas like they never took on before. And what is it all from? The mitzvah of Bais Mois Morim. Because he had this book, which I don't even know where it is. I had this book. I couldn't find it in my bookshelves. I candle of my own, a gorgeous book. And so when we see in the poem that that nothing the Rebbe says is without meaning and without repercussion. It may take a long time till you see it. But in the meantime, if you don't see it, so you don't see it. Trach good, Sein good. You should be Mrs. Stern. Very lucky is this woman, Laura. Very lucky are her friends. Very lucky is Mrs. Sternberg that she gets to see the fruits of the hundreds and thousands of paulas that she did with this mitzvah. And lucky are we that we have the schus to do the mitzvahim and the inyanim of the Rebbe. And if we see the Paris, then Paris will be lucky. We should be zeichel to see the Rebbe himself. Who you can learn to take it from Yad Mamish L'chaim.